Now, normally, wild carrots are considered to be a spring to early summer wild edible, and for good reason. That's the time when the edible tubers, the carrots underground, are most edible. However, in the late fall, when other wild edibles are scarce, this plant can provide some nutrition in a couple different forms. Most notably, the old dried seed pods have a lot of burr-like seeds that are apparently edible on their own. I've never tried them, although they are apparently very strongly flavored and covered in a lot of tiny hairs, so they're not the most palatable thing, but you could survive on them. And if you were interested in long-term survival, you could take them and plant them either now or in the spring and have an early food source that is close to where your shelter is or another resource you frequent. In addition, you will sometimes find some confused young wild carrot plants that germinate at the wrong time. Now, nature isn't perfect, and plants make mistakes. Here on this rocky, pebbly beach, I'm guessing that on a warmer day, the sun heats all this up, the seeds get confused, think it's spring, and start to germinate, which results in these struggling young wild carrot plants. Now, unfortunately for these plants, their mistake is probably going to be fatal. I don't think they'll survive very long into the winter, as they're already struggling with purple leaves and twists and having trouble growing in general. Also, because of this, I wouldn't recommend eating these unless you had no choice, for good reason. When plants are struggling like this, they tend to not be all that good to eat. One, I doubt there's that much sugar in those tubers, so they're not going to taste that good. And more importantly, some of the identification characteristics might be different. Especially with wild carrot, identification is very important because poison hemlock and water hemlock look reasonably similar when they're young like this. When the wild carrots are struggling like this, they look even more like poison hemlock than normal. For instance, purple stems are an indicator of poison hemlock, and the stems on these struggling plants are purple. And also, I've seen a couple of the stems which were devoid of hairs because they were struggling, and you never want to eat a wild carrot if it doesn't have hairs, because poison hemlock and water hemlock don't have hairs, and that's the main identifying characteristic that will assure you that it's a wild carrot. It'll have tiny hairs on the stem, and if it doesn't have those, don't eat it, because it could be a struggling wild carrot, but a poison hemlock plant of this size could easily kill you. Also, I can't say for sure about wild carrots, but I do know that some struggling plants produce toxic compounds that either aren't present in healthy individuals or are not present in dangerous quantities. So yes, in the fall, wild carrots are not the best choice of a wild edible, but they might keep you alive, especially if you have no other options. Well, hope you all enjoyed. See ya.